I'm so excited to talk to you about Big Read Wichita selection this year, Circe by Madeline Miller. And I think one of the things that I want to talk to you about is just how to approach reading it. Because I think a lot of people question, should I read Homer's Odyssey first? And the short answer is no, you don't have to. You can just read Circe on its own. But if you want to, I think it might enrich your reading experience a little bit. And there are so many different ways you can approach even Homer's Odyssey. One thing you might want to do is figure out who Circe is first, because Homer didn't invent her. In fact, in the Odyssey, I think she only appears in books 10 and 12. Circe is part of Greek mythology. She was around for years before Homer wrote about her, and I think Virgil's Aeneid even has her in like chapter 7. And there are just a lot of different mentions of Circe throughout different writings in history. But this book does focus on the legend of Circe, and it does involve a lot of the characters that appear in the Iliad and the Odyssey written by Homer. So I think what we need to do first is ask, who is Circe? Circe is a goddess. She is the daughter of the Titan Helios, who is the sun god, and the nymph Perse. And Circe is one of their 4 children, and she is a witch. And when she uses these powers, she is punished by her father and she is exiled to an island. And, the story that we know from Homer's Odyssey is that she, when boats come ashore and when sailors come ashore, she turns the men into pigs and kills them. Well, that's the short story. That's one perspective. That's Homer's perspective. And what Madeline Miller's book does, it offers Circe's perspective. It is told through Circe. She is the one narrating the story. And, I think I like to think of it as we're learning about her world through her lens. There's this one child book, this juvenile picture book by John Sheska and Lane Smith. It's called The True Story of the 3 Little Pigs, and it's told by a wolf. And it's told from the wolf's perspective. And we learn through that book that, the wolf is completely misunderstood. He had a cold. He didn't really mean to blow those houses down. He just had a cold. He really was trying to befriend these 3 little pigs. And so, seeing that story through a different lens, I think it's an important lesson that there's always another side to every story. And that's what we get with Circe. We are told the story of the Odyssey through her perspective. If you do want to learn a little bit more about Homer before you read Circe, there are just a few different books and even editions that you can read. I read a juvenile picture book called Black Ships Before Troy. It was a picture book meant for kids, but it helped my understanding. It gave me that entryway into Homer. And then I also have a copy of a junior high version. And this one is less poetic and more prose, which made it more accessible to me. I have another version that's all prose, even though it's meant for adults. It doesn't have that, the sing-songy lines. And that's something important to know about Homer if you do try this, the Fagel version, Robert Fagel's translation. It's very sing-songy, and Homer was meant to be told orally. You'll hear a lot of lyrics and lines repeated because that was a way the storyteller could just keep saying this refrain over and over. So you might read something and 20 pages later you're reading the same thing again. Well, it was intentional, and that's how they would remember the story, and they could tell it orally. One thing about reading a retelling or a reimagining is that you get to learn it from a different point of view. And as I mentioned, we're hearing this from Circe's perspective. And this chapter starts off with this thought from Circe. Later, years later, I would hear a song made of our meeting. The boy who sang it was unskilled, missing notes more often than he hit, yet the sweet music of the verses shone through his mangling. I was not surprised by the portrait of myself, the proud witch undone before the hero's sword, kneeling and begging for mercy. Humbling women seemed to me a chief pastime of poets, as if there can be no story unless we crawl and weep. And I just love that from this mention, we understand that Circe has heard Homer's, his epic poem. He has heard what has been written about her. And we get to we get to see it from her eyes, and we get to, it brings a little bit of the feminine perspective in this as well, and she touches on, through her story, we get to see how gods were treated, whether they were men or women, or lesser gods if they were men or women, or men or women. It's a great study of gender, and it's just one fascinating aspect of this book. I really don't want anybody to hear Circe, Greek mythology, and be afraid of this book. This book brings Greek mythology to the reader in a way that just makes it so accessible. It makes it a pleasure to read. If you have no history with Greek mythology, you'll recognize a few names. Achilles. Everybody's heard of Achilles. You have one on your heel. But then there are other names that you might, have a better understanding of, like the Minotaur, and his name was Arterion. And you're introduced to Medea and to Jason, and you're reintroduced to Agamemnon and Hermes, which, if it's around your neck, that's not how we pronounce it, but when we're talking about the god, it's pronounced Hermes. And this is just a great way to reacquaint yourself if you do have a little bit of knowledge of the Greek mythology, or to learn it brand new. Now, one thing I do love that Madeline Miller does, there is a cast of characters in the back, which gives you even a better understanding and shows you where they show up in other works. And it's just, it's not something to be afraid of. And sometimes when you read this and you look at Agamemnon, it's not an easy word to read. It's not an easy name to read. So one thing I like to do is even listen to an audio version while I read, and it just kind of starts sealing those names in, and you start hearing them, and you hear the repetition, and pretty soon it's rolling off your tongue. So bottom line, do you have to read anything Homer related? Do you have to have an understanding of Greek mythology to read Circe? No, but read this book. Read it just for the beautiful story and the beautiful way it's told.